The mobile apps that we build with Bubble do require that our user's device is connected to the internet in order for the app to function properly. But our apps can still function to a limited degree, even if there is no internet available. I want to show you that if I turn off my Wi-Fi here, so that my phone has no internet, I now see this offline banner at the top of the screen, and oddly enough, I can still view all of my data here. So what's going on here? So I want you to imagine that we've got two individual users viewing our app on their devices. And we've of course got a single backend environment. So this is our server here. And when both of our users' devices are connected to the internet, that means that if there is, for example, this data type A, we can think of this like a diary entry or a social media post or anything, right? It doesn't really matter. We've got this one data type that our users' devices both want to retrieve. And so what they're going to do is they're both going to pull that data type A from the server over the internet into their device so they can view it on their device. Now, let's say one of our users chooses to update this data type. So they're going to update one of the fields so that it's slightly different. Well, this request to change the data type is going to be pushed so that the master version, if you will, the actual data type on the server in the database is going to be updated, and any other connected devices, like this device over here, are going to subsequently view that latest version. But now let's say this device over here loses access to the internet, and this user over on the left here makes another update to the data type. And that update, of course, is going to be saved within our backend, within our database. Well, what's going to happen is that the device that is now not connected to the internet is not going to see that update. But what they will have access to is the last version of that data that they downloaded, if you will, from the internet. So they can still view this B version of the data just fine. It's just that now this data is out of sync with the real-time state of that data as it's been stored within the database. And this capacity here for this device to hold on to some older version of the data, in other words, to hold on to a local version within this device's memory, we call this caching. And caching literally means to store something away for future use. So this is what squirrels do during the summer months, right? They cache all of the nuts, bury them away so that during the winter months, they can access them. Our users' devices are doing exactly the same thing here. This device, when it did have access to the internet, it cached this version of the data, this B version of the data, so that it could use it in future in case it lost access to the internet. And now what happens is that when it does regain access to the internet, is that it will just download here the latest version of the data. Now, clearly this offline banner is appearing whenever the user's device isn't connected to the internet. But how does that work? So you might have noticed that in all of the views that we've created so far, we've got this offline banner element. And I have totally ignored this. I have not acknowledged the existence of this banner throughout the entire course. So if you've been waiting for this moment, thank you for your patience. So I'm just going to display it here on screen. And the first thing that you might notice is that it's an element that I cannot open up and edit the content within. It's also got this purple appearance and sort of this diamond symbol. So it looks a little different to all of the other elements that we've been dealing with. I'm going to deal with why that is in just a moment. But first, I want to just draw your attention to the conditional tab for this element. And you see we've got a couple of conditions here that are related to whether or not the user's device is online or not. This connection is offline is a data source that we have access to. And we can use this in any way that we want. So on this app bar, for example, I could say that when the connection is offline, that I want to change the whole background color of this app bar to, say, this shade of red. And so that will mean that when I'm offline, this app banner has this red color to it. So you can use this condition in whatever way that you feel appropriate for modifying the logic and the appearance of your application. For example, one of the things that you might want to do is hide this button that allows a user to create a trip when they're offline. So you could have a condition here that says when the connection is offline, then we're going to hide this floating group with the button inside. But let's say that we don't do this. So you've still got here the ability for your users to create data even if they're offline. How's that going to work? Well, let's see what happens. I'm going to try to create a new trip here while I'm offline. Okay, so I just hit create, but I'm not seeing anything here on the screen. Well, let's see what happens here when I turn my Wi-Fi back on. And now you see that entry, that trip that I created while I was offline is now appearing. So what's going on there? Well, we've got the user's device and we've got the server. And let's say, just to start us off, that they are connected via the internet. And that in our backend, in our database, we've got this data type A, and our user's device has retrieved that data type and is displaying it on the screen. This is our starting point. Now let's say that our user loses internet at this point. But nonetheless, what they try to do is they try to run a workflow which is going to update the data type from A to B. So what they effectively are trying to do is to tell the database to make this change as well. But without the internet connection, that's not possible. So what Bubble actually handles there behind the scenes is that workflow to update the data type, it caches. So in other words, this workflow is going to be held locally in the memory of this user's device, waiting for the internet connection to be restored. Because once it is restored, this workflow will then be sent to the server, sent to our backend environment, where it will then execute or run, in other words, and of course, make the corresponding change in the database. So the critical point here is that it's not just data that gets cached on our user's mobile device, but also workflows. So that's offline behavior in a nutshell. Now in the next lesson, I want us to address what I sort of just skimmed over in this lesson, which is the fact that we've got this offline banner here that I can't actually edit. But nonetheless, if I look at other views in my app, I also have exactly the same offline banner. So we're going to understand what this all means in the next lesson.